So by now, many of you have seen videos of farmers who voted for Donald Trump in the November 2024 election and who are crying because work that they did for the U.S. Department of Agriculture under contract is in jeopardy of not getting paid. There's an article from the Washington Post from February 10th, 2025. Farmers on the hook for millions after Trump freezes USDA funds. And in this article, they talk about how farmers report missing millions of dollars of funding they were promised by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, despite promises from the Trump administration that a federal funding freeze would not apply to projects directly benefiting individuals. Now, on Donald Trump's first day in office, January 20th, 2025, he ordered the U.S. Department of Agriculture to freeze funds for several programs designated by former President Joe Biden's signature Clean Energy and Healthcare Law, which was the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. Now, keep in mind, no Republicans in the House or the Senate voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. Okay? So the freeze paused some funding for the department's Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which helps farmers address natural resource concerns in the Rural Energy for America program, which provides financial assistance for farmers to improve their infrastructure. So the Inflation Reduction Act was dealing with, one of the things it was dealing with was fighting climate change, and it had policies in there to benefit farmers and grants to help farmers. Now, farmers who signed contracts with the U.S. Department of Agriculture under these programs paid up front to build fencing, plant new crops, and install renewable energy systems with guarantees that the federal government would issue grants and loan guarantees to cover at least part of their cost. Now, with that money frozen, these farmers are on the hook. And they have Donald Trump to thank for this, and many of them voted for Donald Trump because for whatever reason, they voted for him and they're getting screwed by him.
I wanted to start off by saying I did vote for Donald Trump. We are possibly going to lose our farm if NRCS doesn't hold up their contract with us on the EQIP program. So the reason that they're not able to hold up the contract is our EQIP program, which is cost sharing on fences, waters, a well, and some seedings, was funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. Because of the executive orders, there's a pause or a freeze on the funding through the Inflation Reduction Act, and they're not able to pay out on the stuff that we completed or anything going forward. I'm not the only one this is affecting. So there are other farmers in the comments saying that they're in the same boat that I'm in because they signed these contracts, and the contracts, even like, so whenever I looked into the contract, I made sure that that funding was set aside. It wasn't funding that, oh, we hope it's there whenever it's done. I made sure that that funding was set aside so that way before I made these business decisions, I knew that funding was there per contract. So they're backing out on the contract because they don't have the funding. They can't release the funds.
So one example that the article gives is of Laura Beth Resnick, who runs a Maryland flower farm. And she says she signed a contract for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, to cover half of a $72,900 solar panel installation. Now, in late January 2025, she said she was told her reimbursement payment was rejected because of Donald Trump's executive order. She said, I really don't know what we would do. It just feels like I can't even really think about it. Now, the USDA has also halted funding for other programs, including scientific research grants in agriculture and producing climate-smart crops, according to a letter sent to the agency from House Democrats on the Agriculture and Appropriations Committee. In the letter, it says, quote, pulling the rug out from these recipients runs counter to the mission of the USDA and will quickly and significantly cripple economic development in rural America. Now, there were millions of people who lived in rural America, millions of people who lived in the southern former Confederate states who voted for Donald Trump. Many of them are farmers, and they're getting screwed by him, just like they got screwed by Donald Trump in his first administration when he killed the soybean market for farmers here in the U.S. with China and started that trade war with China, dealing with the soybean market. Now, the disruption to funds appropriated through Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act takes aim at one of Biden's flagship legislative accomplishments. Most of the funding was paid out in the last month of his presidency, January 2025, according to a Washington Post analysis, but grants worth $32 billion authorized under the Inflation Reduction Act remain vulnerable to being frozen. Now, the USDA made $3.1 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act available in the 2024 fiscal year for climate-smart agriculture activities, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, including grants and loans for initiatives such as the Environmental Quality Incentives Program and the Rural Energy for America program. So a lot of people heard Inflation Reduction Act and didn't understand that it had these policies for rural America, and this stuff is being taken away now by Donald Trump. So once again, we have a classic example of how elections have consequences. Hashtag we try to tell you, but don't blame me because I voted for the black woman. Vice President Kamala Harris had a much better economic plan. Her policies were much better for America. It would have helped millions of people as well as these rural farmers. So like, comment, and share this broadcast. Follow me on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook. Follow me on YouTube and Instagram at Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, and on Fanbase at The African History Network, The African History Network on Fanbase. Visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for my online classes. Listen to the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My DVD lectures and digital downloads are there as well. Did you know that the Washington Monument is based upon an ancient African structure called a tekken that comes from the mythology of Asar, Arset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus? Did you know that the panther deity Bast in the movie Black Panther and Wakanda Forever comes from an ancient African deity, a neter in ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, called Bastet? Did you know that there were 17 pyramids found buried underneath Egypt around 2011? Also, the city of Memphis, Tennessee. What's the relationship between Memphis, Tennessee and Memphis in ancient Egypt? I'm historian and national political commentator Michael Imhotep. Be sure to register for my new 12-week online history course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Kemet is one of the original names for Egypt. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Did you know that the word Wakanda is a real word? We find it in the Key Congo language, which is a Bantu language, but we also find it in the Omaha Ponca and Sioux Indian Native American languages. My class starts up Saturday, March 1st, 2025, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is a 12-week online history course. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. When we talk about the transatlantic slave trade, we can't start our studying of the history in 1619 in Hampton, Virginia, or in Jamestown. We can't start in 1441 with the transatlantic slave trade starting with the Portuguese. We have to deal with thousands of years of history that leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We'll deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who take the teachings from the Nile Valley